Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later, we're going to talk to a couple of guys you don't want to listen to about some of the politics. Yeah, that's Miller Hudson and Dominic Duzzuti, you know him. But first, from the AP, Jim Anderson, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, sir.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of these ballot issues. Particularly, I want to start off with what I think is a little confusing of the open primary and open caucuses.
Right.
Now, this sounds very populist, and after the primaries here, or the caucuses here for Bernie Sanders, people were angry on the Democratic side because there wasn't enough room in the caucuses. And then, of course, Donald Trump said he was ripped off in Colorado, which made no sense to me. He just didn't play in those caucuses.
Understood.
But what are these ballot initiatives doing? What's the problem, and then what's the solution?
Well, the problem is that with unaffiliated voters being the largest segment here, and so many of them wanting to participate in either the major party caucuses way back in early this year. On the Democratic side, hundreds if not thousands tried to suddenly show for the Democrats and vote for Bernie, and couldn't. They spent hours in lines, and the party apparatus was totally unprepared for this. In fact, they had predicted diminished turnout this year.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, and so when Bernie came, they weren't ready.
Absolutely. On the other side, the Republican caucuses here, the state party decided that we wouldn't have a presidential preference poll. And that was because they did not want, under national party rules, to bind the results of the caucuses to the national convention. For instance, if we chose Ted Cruz, right, and he drops out, what do we do?
That's a real subtlety there that I don't think people got. In the Democratic caucuses, they were overrun with people because they had a binding presidential poll, basically, that night of caucuses.
Absolutely.
Republicans said months in advance.
This year,
they said, we're not going to do that anymore.
No.
Because what happens if we say the votes go, you said Ted Cruz or Mark Rubio, and they drop out, where do they go? That didn't sit well with a lot of Republicans.
No, and it still doesn't. It still doesn't. And so what you saw during the legislative session that ended in May were a couple of attempts that failed to address this problem, to discuss the possibility of reinstituting a presidential primary in Colorado. And then the discussion took into account unaffiliateds. These were introduced late in the session, got nowhere. And so you have an organization called Let Colorado Vote, which is behind two initiatives, numbers 98 and 140. They're very similar or related. We could talk about them almost as one. That attempt to impose a solution from the outside, and to a large extent, saying, okay, caucus time is over. It's too confusing for people. Colorado's not getting an early say on the national stage when it comes to the two major political parties and their presidential selection processes. And also because unaffiliateds are the largest, 37% voting bloc, active voters here in Colorado, and they're growing. 44% of those who have registered as new voters are unaffiliated.
Yeah, this seems so odd, because what it does is it says these unaffiliateds can go vote for.
That's what they want. That's what they want this to do.
And why? What's the end goal? I can't help but say, as a partisan, and I'm a registered Republican, I don't want other people coming in who don't register with the party, because they can come in just to sabotage it. Well, they can come and sabotage it anyway. They just have to register.
Well, you've just voiced what both parties on the state level, where they stand on this. It's like, look, you can already, as an independent voter, register as a Republican to participate in the caucuses. Were it to be a primary, a binding primary, you can do the same. You can register the same day and vote, and then unaffiliate later on.
Right.
So you can already do that.
Just takes more work.
It takes more work.
And it's not And a primary, though, is different than a caucus.
Right.
You'll be mailed a ballot, so it makes it a
Yes.
lot easier. Right now, if you're unaffiliated, you need to register and then go drive down to a caucus and say, I want to vote for this guy.
Absolutely.
Here, you're going to get a lot more voter turnout from unaffiliateds because they can choose either presidential race to weigh in on.
Absolutely. And so those who favor this want to avoid the confusion and the anger and resentment that many folk had both within and without the party. But they advocate that, you know what, if taxpayers have something, it's almost a circular argument. If the taxpayers are staging the vote in November, where you have Hillary and Donald Trump, we should at least be able, as an unaffiliated tax-paying citizen, I should have a right to have an earlier role in the selection process.
But you do have a right. You just have to join a party.
Well, you do.
That's it. Just join a party.
You do.
All right, and the second one is for caucuses too. It does the same thing for caucuses.
Now, one initiative would allow the parties, both allow unaffiliateds just to vote.
Right.
Now, county clerks are nervous. There could be spoiled ballots. If you get a ballot with both parties in there and you mark one, you mark the other, and
I assume you toss it out.
It's going to be tossed out. But that takes a lot of time on the county clerk level. It costs money. It'll cost $1 per 1 million extra ballots to send out. And in the process itself, the Secretary of State has estimated, if we have a presidential primary, be $5 to $7 million more, which would come out of the state general fund. Okay.
Wow.
Now,
and we should mention, Colorado for a while had presidential primaries.
Yes, it did.
When you would actually go to the voting booth and they'd say, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat?
Right.
You're a Democrat, go here. Republican, go to that voting booth.
And that process after 2003 was dropped because of the cost.
Because of the cost.
Cost, which was, $3 million the state didn't have at that time. And there was not a lot of debate over that.
Quick question before we're out of time on this.
Absolutely.
Why didn't the legislature, both Republicans and Democrats, who hate this idea equally, why didn't they pass something on their own to preempt this? Because I thought the plan was, if we pass something, then the guys who want this won't spend so much money to try to get it on the ballot.
Right.
Why did they fail, or did they even try?
That's a good question. Perhaps a leading question, John. It came very late. These parties aren't totally unified. You had people who wanted that to get going, but it was introduced way late in the process. They were worried about balancing the budget. The parties themselves are still opposed. They were opposed to that process. They're opposed to this process. They are, you know what? We're private organizations. Our members should decide what you got.
On completely unrelated ballot issue.
Got you.
Explain this thing on slavery. This has been referred by the legislature.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't a citizens' initiative, so it's on there for free.
No.
And what does it clarify?
It clarifies in the Constitution drawn up in 1876, Section 2 stipulates that there shall be no slavery or indentured servitude except if someone has committed a crime, an appropriate crime, a severe crime, and has been convicted of it. And that language has pretty much stayed throughout our history. And these days, slavery, it's like what it does is create a tiny, tiny loophole that conceivably acknowledges the existence
of involuntary servitude.
Right. Exactly.
Which, if you want that, you go get married.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Here all night.
Hi, Julie, my wife. All right. So, and there have been concerns raised. It's like, well, what do we do with this? This clause allows us to employ prisoners in Colorado correctional industries as kind of penance for what they've done. And the Department of Corrections says, no. They opt into this work thing. So if we abolish this, we get rid of, just the horrible remnants, and especially in this time when race is on all of our minds.
Is this one a slam dunk? Is this thing
It's a slam dunk.
Yeah. Jim, gotta run. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay tuned.